Singapore's green plan is transforming urban heat into lush green oases, making nature an everyday experience. Join Renjie and me as we explore the innovative ways Singapore is creating a sustainable, eco-friendly haven. So RJ, now I've been to Singapore maybe more than 35 or 40 times, right? One thing that Singapore is also known for, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, is that it can get really hot.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Now, I keep hearing about this thing where the answer to this heat is Singapore's green plan.
Yes.
But what really is the green plan?
Well, okay, here's the thing. First of all, the green plan, I'll tell you what it's not. It's not a plan to eat healthy. That's a separate program, national program that we have. No, but okay, here's a question. How much of Singapore do you think is green, is covered in greenery?
Now, Singapore is a small country.
It's a small country. And it's a very densely populated country.
And I keep seeing buildings everywhere.
Yeah.
Some skyscrapers here and there. So I would say about 10 or 20% of Singapore would be
10 or 20%?
green. Yeah.
So Singapore is 50% covered by greenery. And a lot of that's got to do with what the green plan is.
Okay.
Which is quite literally a plan to green Singapore, number one. But number two, also greening Singapore conceptually. In other words, using nature in order to deal with a lot of the challenges of the future of living in an urban environment, right?
Okay.
And so at its core, it's really a scheme to make sure that Singapore remains sustainable. And for us, as you point out, it's not just a trendy buzzword. It's something of national importance because it's already so hot and sweaty in Singapore, right?
Exactly.
Singapore is just kind of one of those places where you accept the fact that you're going to be slightly sticky. But one example of this, and directly to the point of sort of the experience of being sweaty and sticky in Singapore, is that when you're walking around any city in the world, it doesn't matter where you are, there tends to be something called the urban heat island effect.
Okay, what is the urban heat island effect?
So the urban heat island effect comes in cities where you have a built-up center, right, where you have a lot of skyscrapers and so on, and the weather, the temperature, tends to be a couple of degrees higher in these centers, just because the heat is all trapped in by the concrete and the steel and the whatever, right? Now in Singapore, something that's very interesting happening all across the downtown center is something called biophilic architecture. But when you walk around Singapore's downtown core, it doesn't feel that much hotter compared to the rest of the island because the rooftops of a lot of buildings are green. So that's how Singapore achieves a 50% coverage of greenery, right? The rooftops are green because it's not just a pretty space, but it's also a way to bring down the temperature of the buildings, i.e. the amount of heat that is absorbed from the sun into steel, concrete. The greenery actually kind of breaks that up a little bit so that then buildings don't end up using that much electricity to cool their buildings. And also in the areas around it, the greenery kind of brings the temperature down. And so that's one example.
Is that why I see hotels all across Singapore now having like plants coming out of different places in that the facade of the building?
Like growing out of the most unlikely crevices, right? So that's exactly the case. And again, I think it's a happy byproduct. It's a very pretty thing to look at. But one of the more sort of iconic buildings in Singapore's downtown is the PARKROYAL on Pickering Hotel. It's a beautiful hotel by the PARKROYAL group, which I love. And it's just covered. It's carpeted, I would say, with greenery. And again, it's really to bring down the temperature of the building. It saves them money from a cost point of view. When you're walking around inside, it's a lot of sort of greenery and glass to let in a lot of natural light. So they also don't end up using that much electricity for lighting. But again, it's just that wonderful shock of green in the middle of a concrete jungle. I just love that aesthetic.
And is this a very recent thing, the green plan, or has it been in place for a long time?
It's been in the works for a long time, and it really is only starting to take effect in the past 5 years, I would say. But it's a plan that continues and that extends all across not just the center of the island, but also all across the rest of Singapore, where you end up having a lot of urban pockets, right? And another thing that's part of the urban green plan is thinking about how to convert old urban spaces into green spaces for recreation.
Okay.
Right. One example of this that I love, and I was just there not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, is something called the Rail Corridor. So Singapore, historically, I mean, being an island at the tip of the Malayan Peninsula, railway was very important to us for our trade, for our sort of, the movement of goods and people and everything like that. So because of that, going from the downtown core of Singapore in Tanjong Pagar, which is where the financial district is, all the way up north to where the zoo is, right, where Mandai is, and right across the border from Malaysia, there is an old railway track. Now, this railway track is from the turn of the century. It's old and it was, disused for a long time.
So not operational.
Not operational. But about 5 years ago, it was converted into something called the Rail Corridor. It's an area that's, many kilometers long, and you can walk essentially on this trail or hop off the trail at any point. It's a very well signposted kind of a trail that essentially uses the train tracks to allow you a path through the rainforests of Singapore. And it's just a wonderful experience because, if you go on any given weekend, it's crowded with locals, people really just walking their dogs or just being out and about in nature. And again, the wonderful part of Singapore is that nature is never too far away, nor is nature so remote. So when you're walking on this, there are cafes by the side, you can hop off to the nearest MRT station, and it's just a wonderful way to kind of be out in nature in the heart of the city center. I think it's a beautiful experience.
And anyone can just go in and walk the corridor.
It's open. It's kind of almost like a park connector network. And again, if you're thinking about like a railway track, it really does cut through the entire city, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's, you turn a corner and it's lush rainforest, you turn another corner and it's like public housing estates. It's really cool.
Okay, so you mentioned a lot about the green plan, and I'd like to take one thing out of this is that wherever you're in Singapore, you're not too far from greenery.
Yes.
So one thing that talks about green stuff, or at least the name suggests, is Gardens by the Bay.
Yes.
So the Gardens by the Bay are very unique, and I'd love to cover them on the next episode. But like we've gone about across all episodes, if you can use one word to describe it or a statement to describe the Gardens by the Bay, what would?
So, okay, bear with me, but I'm actually going to say like a mirage.
Okay.
Right? A mirage in all of its shimmery, sort of fantastical form. That, in my mind, is what Gardens by the Bay is.
So let's end this episode on this note, and in the next one, let's find out what the Gardens by the Bay are all about.
Mystical, no?
Yeah, awesome.